So I've asked a few people to put on some visual identifiers of gender stereotypes. Don't click yet. Okay, I'll say click, okay? So a few people hesitated actually to wear the scarf or the tie. And the reason I did this is because I wanted people to feel what it might be to be the different person in the room, okay? To experience that as a person, that you are the person who is gender different. Even though you know that your gender identity did not change when you came in the room, you just put on one little teeny identifier, but somehow you started to feel a little bit different, right? So I just kind of want you to sit with that and see how other people might be looking at you. We've got enough in the room that it's not rare, so a few people have them on. Nobody said, ooh, I want to put that necktie on, or ooh, I want to put the skirt on. I'm going to go to the bathroom. None of the guys said, I want to go to the bathroom, take off my pants, and put the skirt on. So, you know, again, those are just the things that I'm watching to see how we talk about this gender is behavior topic. Alrighty. So most of our experience of people is visual. When we look at people, we make a lot of inferences about what we see. We make inferences based on the color of their skin. We make inferences based on their height, weight. We make inferences about their posture, how they're wearing their hair, what clothes they're wearing. And so when we see people whose behavior, which is something that's a visual indicator that's a little bit different, we make these assumptions. We make some judgments. And this talk hopefully will help us to at least become aware of our judgments. Next slide. Somebody, whoever did it, left the gingerbread person on the unit. I don't know who brought it to the unit, but it was right about the time that I was starting to talk. And I really liked it. It was, I think it's version 3.0. I have it right there. The gingerbread person is free for copy. It's not copywritten. And it's a combination of a lot of different material. Normally, and I want to say normally, usually, most of us think about gender as a binary relationship. So you'll hear those words, the binary, binary gender, where there's female and male. And so here you can see the gender identity. You've got woman and man. Gender expression, like we've got people with scarves on, okay? Feminine, masculine, and then you got the middle, sort of this middle zone, right? Now sex, as you can see, is your body part. So some people want to be politically correct and they want to say, what's the gender of your baby? Well, you don't know the gender of the baby till the baby comes out and starts acting a certain way, because gender is what? There we go, okay. At the end, they're going to be like, behavior, okay. And how you express your gender is by the things that you do. So when we ask about the sex of the baby, it's truly about the sex of the baby. And then there's the other part of sex, which is sexual orientation. And you can see here still the binary illustration where there's heterosexual, homosexual, and then sort of the middle. So next slide. As the creator of this decided, okay, well, that was okay, but it's actually more than that, right? And I'm sure he's got way more than 50 hours of research in on this. Version 2.0 starts to look at a spectrum, okay? So now you're starting to see womanness and manness on the same side of the spectrum, as opposed to at opposite ends, okay? And so you've got, with gender identity, you've got womanness and manness, okay? And you've got non-gendered. Because we still like to think of things in categories like this binary. Gender expression as masculine, feminine, and agender. Biological sex as femaleness or maleness, body part, remember body part, okay? And then there's the asex, which would be a hermaphrodite or an intersex. So the appropriate term for a hermaphrodite now, someone who's born with either ambiguous sexual genitalia or both body parts, is called intersex. And there's going to be a lot of vocabulary, okay? And then it was, okay, so who are you attracted to? Well, if you're not attracted to anybody, then you're asexual. But what if you're attracted, it doesn't really matter what your gender is, your gender identity, your gender expression, your biological sex, in terms of who you're attracted to. So it kind of got deep when it got down to that. I'm like, woo, okay, this is getting a little thick. Let's go to version 3. All right, so this is version 3.3. And as I read about it, he was trying to get to the point where he was less wordy and more visual, okay, about this. And when he put the attraction in, he realized, okay, there are more than just gender and sex, more than just gender's behavior, more than your behavior, and more than your body part that makes people attracted to other people, right? Sometimes it's your smell. I mean, we're still pretty smelly people at the end of the day, and the perfume industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Sometimes you're attracted to somebody because of smell. And it may not even be a romantic attraction. It might be a spiritual attraction, okay? So there are all these different levels of attraction, and that has nothing to do with whether they're male or female. Some people would say they have a man crush. Like I've heard guys say, I got a man crush on another guy. You know, their sexuality is straight, but they had to acknowledge that they were attracted to this person in that way. And so we're gonna do a little flash of the next slide, but we're not gonna leave it there, okay? All right, we're gonna take that off because I don't like that one. I'm gonna redraw it, okay? Thanks. This slide, the reason I put this up here is because I think at some point we're gonna get to this circle approach. We're gonna go from binary, and I think we're there now, I just don't think that the illustration is out there yet, to spectrum or sphere, S-P-H-E-R-E. Okay, so anybody in the room labeled a tomboy when they were a kid? I'm the only one, me? Oh, okay, good, we got some more tomboys. All right, so a tomboy is where on the sphere? Tell me when to stop. What kind of tomboy were you? Tell me when to stop. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Stop here? Oh, okay, anybody else want to tell me where their tomboyness stopped? Okay, so here, tell me the gender of this person. Cigar smoking, boater, snowboarder, doctor. Male or female? Stereotypically male. Do I look like a guy? No, okay. That would be Dr. King, okay? So I throw that out there because I can put myself out there like that instead of throwing somebody else out there. And so this is where this spectrum of things goes, okay? So it's okay to be a tomboy. Now let's see if anybody in the room says anything about the other way, okay? So anybody in the room who's a guy who was called a princess boy. We've got a book called The Princess Boy, okay? And thank you very much. This is a true story about a kid similar to the kid we had not too long ago whose initials start with L. And this princess boy is, under 10 years old. So it's not about sex because they're a preteen, okay? This is about gender. And so what we would see in this person's behaviors is that they were opting for, can we see our lovely scarf wearers in the room? They were opting for the lovely scarves, okay? Right, and so the behaviors would change as they got happier as they had these kind of flowy things on. So there are a lot of not nice names out there for men who are on this side of the sphere. If anybody so chooses, was anybody in the room the opposite of a tomboy, a princess boy? Yes, all right, and so tell me where to stop. Where do I go? How far do I come around here? Right here? Okay, all righty. And so thank you so much for volunteering that information. So if you could, what's the nicest name somebody said? Because there's less tolerance for boys to be princess boys than there are for girls to be tomboys. What was one of the nicest names? Pretty boy. Ha, I like that. Oh. Did you do that for real, Carolyn? I'll make it right. Don't worry. I'll make it right. Okay. Pretty boy. Yeah, you know what? At least I don't have to put on blush for the camera, huh? Alrighty, so next slide, please. 2 slides, yes. So this is where we're gonna kind of start the lectures if I haven't already started it. But James 6:37, we're, Pine Rest Christian Mental Health. So we wanna start with a scripture. Do not judge and you will not be judged. Do not condemn and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. So I like this scripture because it kind of breaks down into judge not to be judged. And none of us really like being judged. And so as we go into this talk about gender is behavior, how is this going to change our approach to our patients who are on the gender sphere? And we may or may not agree with this. We may not agree with this, but I think the one thing that we all agree with is that it doesn't feel good to be judged. And so if we start there, I think that will allow us to gain the empathy that's needed in order to deal with some of these difficult patients. Alrighty. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So I go from the Bible to Prince, really, Carolyn? Okay, so back in the 80s, there was an artist named Prince, and Prince definitely is a pretty boy, okay? Still is, and he's 50-something years old, okay? And he's still a pretty boy. And I would think that Prince took this gender sphere all the way there, right? Prince wore stilettos. I think he's down to wedges now, or lower stilettos. He wore stilettos and blouses, okay? And mustaches. And you can see his stilettos in this picture right here. And I mean, he's a petite man, but that still doesn't mean you have to wear stilettos, right? So he definitely helped people to bend the thoughts that were previously held about what's a man and what's a woman. Because Prince, heterosexual or homosexual? Anybody? Heterosexual. And pretty much people are comfortable with that now, right? But when he came out, everybody was saying that Prince was gay. Everybody, myself included, okay? He's got to be gay. Guys don't dress like that. So today the learning objectives are to distinguish the difference between gender and sex, to look at the vocabulary of the LGBTQA community, including gender pronouns, and to learn about how we can help our patients with gender dysphoria or conflicts around sexuality. Next slide. All right. So gender is the state of being male or female. It's a set of behaviors typically viewed as either masculine, feminine, neutral, but gender is not sex. So I'm not just going to read the slides because that'll just be boring. I'll elaborate on them as you can see. So on the Diane Sawyer, how many people saw the Diane Sawyer interview of Bruce Jenner before the transition? Okay, it was awesome. Okay, and if you have not seen it, it is awesome. If you want a copy of the PowerPoint, there'll be copies available. Donna can send them to you. I got about maybe 5 slides of references at the end, and that's one of them. Most of them are links. So one of the statements was, gender is who you go to sleep as. Gender is who you go to sleep as, okay? So when you go to sleep at night, Connor said, I'm a boy, okay? His favorite color is green, okay? So we still use these binary terms to talk about gender, maleness, and femaleness. Like we don't say, I'm a tomboy. I don't go to sleep saying to myself, I'm a tomboy, okay? I don't think you go to sleep saying you're a pretty boy. Maybe you do. Well, it depends. Depends on the day. Okay, so we still have some work to do in terms of thinking in this gender binary. But if you think about gender, gender is separated from sex in that it's not about the organ. Gender is about your behavior. And interestingly enough, this gender dynamic, this gender sphere is not just happening here. Some people are saying, where's all this coming from? How come it's all of a sudden? It's actually not. So in India, where you had royalty and peasants, oftentimes people were born intersex, previously known as hermaphrodites, and they were eunuchs, meaning they could not procreate. And so that's a nice, safe person to have around your kids in the palace. So needless to say, they got a nice lifestyle inherited to them because they were safe. Well, there became this, and then sometimes people were actually made that way. They were castrated and made that way. And so now you have this population of people in India called the Hilras, I think I'm saying it correctly, and they're actually become a third gender. So the government acknowledges them on your driver's license. You can say male, female, third sex, other, third gender rather, third gender, other. Something to wrap your head around, right? The other gender. When we think about Caitlyn Jenner, she's transgender. For those who have seen the interview, Caitlyn Jenner went from being an Olympic winning athlete to now a woman. Her behaviors are feminine. She's got scarves, stilettos. And in the interview, one of the things that Diane Sawyer asked her was, do you like men or women? And Bruce, soon to be Caitlyn, said, I don't know, I've always liked women. Because Bruce's gender behaviors had nothing to do with Bruce's sex, which is the body part, or an activity. Any questions? Are we getting there with the gender's behavior? It took me about 20 hours to be able to wrap my head around this. Native Americans have a two-spirited person that's been around for a long time, which again is a person who may be very sensitive and emotional, but is a male. Or the opposite, a woman who's very strong and aggressive and is more like a warrior. They call them people who are two-spirited. All righty, next slide. Sex refers to either the reproductive organs, male or female, which is the plumbing, or the act of recreating by having intercourse for reproductive purposes or for pleasure. So sex, Diane Sawyer's quote again, is the act of who you go to sleep with. Gender is who you go to sleep as, sex, who you go to sleep with. All right, any questions so far? All righty. So I like this one. You can't probably see it too well. Can you see in the back? Okay. Is video okay? Okay. So this kind of was a little confusing at first. I thought I saw some pink boys and some blue girls, but maybe it was just late when I saw it. Because we really even our cookies. If you're a boy, you're going to go for the boy cookie if it's got blue on. If you're a girl, you're going to go for the pink cookie if it's got pink on it. That's just how stereotypic our society is when it comes to that. So let's go to the next slide. Stereotypic masculinity. These are those stereotypically masculine gender roles. Boys have courage, they're independent, they're assertive. Sounds like a leader, right? Sounds like a leader. Their toys are trucks, guns, cars, clothes, and sports. Let's go to the next slide. Girls, stereotypic femininity is gentleness, empathy, sensitivity. Sounds like a caregiver. And the girls, stereotypic feminine toys, dolls, dress up, dishes, clothes, sports are different. So the clothes are scarves, a piece of fabric, whereas a boy is a tie. The sports, traditionally less aggressive sports. So does this sound like a leader when we look at these stereotypic feminine roles, gender roles? It doesn't. And so part of our culture, as we've got women in leadership, has to look at how we relate to people based on their gender when they're in leadership roles. Because guys can be caregivers, empathetic, sympathetic, and women can be leaders. And so we're really getting into a place where there's gender fluidity. Another word, I said there'd be a lot of vocabulary. Gender dysphoria. This is sort of the prelude to a video that comes later. So there are people who just kind of flow in and out of gender. You know, wake up as a guy and go to bed as a woman. So that statement about gender is who you wake up or go to bed as is actually already archaic, because you might, you know, look like Dr. King in the morning and go on the boat and be all muddy and sloppy in the evening. Does that mean your sexuality changed? Not at all. Your behaviors changed. And because of that binary thinking that we have, that becomes part of what people think of as gender fluidity. And I think that's what some of our teenagers are coming in with, not understanding, does this mean, if I'm gender fluid, does this mean that I'm gay? Does this mean that my sex, my sexuality has to match my gender? Because if I'm a guy, if I'm acting like a guy, then I gotta like girls. I can't act like a guy and like guys. This is too confusing, right? So this is where the binary system, I think, is getting in the way of some of our teenagers, and we see them as confused sometimes because they haven't really separated it out. This gender dysphoria came from, in DSM-5, it came from gender identity disorder, and before that, there was homosexuality. And there really wasn't any talk about a gender specifier in DSM-3. All right, next slide. I am not going to go over all of this, but this is the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria for gender dysphoria in children, and I thought, you know, if I'm talking about gender, I got to talk about the DSM-5. And so our patient, L, how many people had contact with L? Okay. I mean, the timing of L being on the unit was so perfect because here we are, and he was my patient, okay? So I'm so excited. So L met criteria 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So L did not meet criteria for the full gender dysphoria because number 1 is a strong desire to be of the other gender. And L never said that. In boys, which is the assigned gender, a strong preference for cross-dressing, checkbox. Number 3, strong preference for cross-gender roles and make-believe play, checkbox. Number 4, strong preference for toys, games, activities of the other gender, checkbox. Strong preference for playmates of the other gender, like playing with girls, checkbox. Number 6, strong rejection of typically masculine toys, games, activities, and a strong avoidance of rough and tumble, or in girls, strong rejection of typically feminine stuff, checkbox. The 2, 7, and 8, strong dislike of one's sexual anatomy, no. A strong desire for primary or secondary sex characteristics that match experienced gender, no. But again, this is a kid who's only 10 years old. So for the DSM-5 to still talk about those sex characteristics is a little bit premature, I think, but it's an evolution. It's not, you know, it's coming to its place in time. One of the things that we did with L was we came up with an individualized treatment plan. And I think we'll be using those more often. Donna, I think you were an initiate of that, where if we're having a struggle, we can have a whole team of people create a gender behavior plan. Is that going to play? Yes. Okay. Can you guys see this? Okay. So tell me, where is the boy and the girl in those 2 kids? You can't see identifiers. All you can see is their behavior. Or what are we looking at? Are we looking at 2 girls, 2 boys? Anybody?
2 boys.
2 boys. Okay. Anybody see something different? Let's play again.
Well, I would, but I knew what he had.
Right, right. So let's try and be objective as we look at it. Can you see it back there? Okay? There we go. I think you just, there we go, okay? So now, if you look to the right, maybe this is just my eyes, you see a kid who is rough and tumble. If you look on the left, you see a kid who's a little bit more delicate, lying down, keeping the knees together, okay? And not only the clothes, but the actual behavior is stereotypic feminine. Let's do it one more time, okay? Now, if we look on the right, stereotypic boy, right? Kind of quick getting up, a little bit softer and gentler. Whoa! A little bit over-exaggerated, a little softer and gentler, okay? And neither of them know that they're being videotaped. I did get permission from Elle's mom to use this for teaching purposes, okay? So, next slide. Gender dysphoria in adolescence. Well, this is now they're starting to get their hormones are kicking in. So this is more about identifying with those secondary sex characteristics. And I don't have an example here, so I'm not going to go through this one. We'll do that another time. Next. All righty, down to the vocabulary. LGBTQA vocabulary 101. Does anybody know what LGBTQA means? Yes.
Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, or queer, or asexual. Because ally doesn't really count because they don't experience the same hostility that LGBT does.
Yes. Thank you so much. So what I did is I chose some words that would be words that people are probably going to hear in the vernacular a lot. Again, there's a references. This comes from U of M's website, and you can have access to just the 5 slides with all the resources. All right, next. Wait, okay, so that's why I had to ask that question. LGBTQ, as we were instructed, is either queer or questioning, and A is asexual or ally, okay? Although all the different identities within LGBT are often lumped together because they share the same sexism as a common root of oppression, and that's what was so eloquently illustrated there, is that because allies don't really share that sexism as a common root of oppression, they really aren't in the LGBTQA, okay? And this helps people who have specific needs and concerns related to individual identity. Next. Gender terminology, cisgender. So, assigned male at birth. Feel free to take it off if you're too uncomfortable with it. Okay, it's getting too warm. Alrighty, or you're feeling some kind of uncomfortable way otherwise. So oftentimes now people were coming in, and when I was at the 1 hour of research, I'm like, what is this assigned gender at birth? What is this? Oh, but now I understand it, because if your gender and sex are not separated, and we're using the same word to describe your behavior and your body part, then how do we distinguish it? If this has to do with the body part, right? What is the sex of the baby? And that's how I remember it. What is the sex of the baby? Now, what is the gender of the baby? Because gender is what? Right. Okay, we're getting there. We got a few more people getting there, okay? It took me 20 hours to get to this, okay? This is Dr. King original. I'm just saying, all right? So some people want to be nicey nice and say, oh, what's the gender of your baby? We don't know. The baby was assigned male at birth. I asked him, are you a boy or a girl? He said, I'm a boy. How do you know? I just know, okay? Because somebody assigned him male at birth. Now, while I'm on this assignment stuff, I just got to talk about this one. Because what about those intersex people? Who assigns their gender? Doom, 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 doom. Who? Doom, 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 doom. Doom, 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 doom. The surgeon. The surgeon assigns. And why would the surgeon do that? Because the parent would be uncomfortable if when the baby was born and the parent says, oh, is it a girl or a boy? Is it a girl or a boy? They say both. Or they say neither. Or they say, I don't know, right? That would be an uncomfortable moment. It would. It would be an uncomfortable moment. So what the surgeon does is the surgeon makes a judgment based on either the length of the male body part or the lack thereof. If there is a clitoris that is elongated, then the surgeon may say, okay, we're going to form this into a phalloplasty and make it a penis. If the penis is not that long, then they'll say, we're going to form this into a vagina. Forget that this child has chromosomes, right?
That are either
XX girl or XY boy. Doesn't matter, because they say that, you know, because we live in a binary society, you need to know which one to be. So they make a decision. Even though you're not going to need these for reproduction for a good 15 years, you're not going to need this for reproduction for a good 15 years, okay, this body part, because you're not going to be starting in on that. Still, because of the discomfort of society, those body parts have been assigned. And so this book right here, Galileo's Middle Finger, I did not create the name, okay? Can't have a gender sexuality talk without provocative stuff, okay, just so you know. Alice Drager is the wife of Dr. Sousa, who is the dean of Michigan State's medical school currently. And she was recruited here because of her awesome research in the intersex community. So you may even run into her. And she's quite an expert and a champion of intersex. And the interesting thing is, did your brain think, well, is she intersex? Anybody honest enough to say, yep, my brain wondered, is she intersex? No? So as I was listening to the book on Audible, because that's how I read, that's one of the things that came out is once you become an ally, then people are going to ask, are you one? Because why else would you be an ally? And it's always interesting. It's happened with, you know, all kinds of civil rights. Coming out is the process of acknowledging one's sexual orientation and or gender identity to other people. For most LGBT people, this is a lifelong process. So Bruce talks about this being, you know, all his life. All his wives knew that he was, you know, had behavior that was of a different gender. So gay is a person who's attracted primarily to members of the same sex. I so wish this was the word for queer. I am so much more comfortable with calling everybody gay that is on the spectrum than calling everybody queer. But that's just me. There is the word queer, which when you want to look up stuff about LGBT, there's queer theory, and so, which was once an offensive term, queer. The LGBT community decided, you know what, let's call ourselves queer. And so there's queer theory, there's, you know, there's a show about queer people. And so I still personally am a little bit uncomfortable with saying my queer friend that lives in New York, you know, my friend who is a homosexual guy, I'm still, you know, gay guy. And homosexual is even offensive. So it's sort of like if you think about race, okay? So it used to be, you could say Negro. And that wasn't a bad thing to call black people, right? Everybody knows I'm black in the room, right? It's not, I'm not outing myself, right? I mean, y'all looked at me like I had done something wrong. Okay, it's okay. So, you know, Negro was the preferred word, and then it was African American or colored, and then some black people didn't really like African American because they don't know enough about Africa to identify with Africa, but they know about being black because they've been black all their lives. And so now black is sort of, I think for a lot of black people, it's a preferred term. I think we'll see the same evolution with the word queer and gay. And again, you know, I try and think I can see in the future. I'm hopeful that the gay community will get comfortable with the word gay because it means happy. You know, it just means happy. Just be happy. Okay? All right. Next. All right. But I can't identify other people. If people want me to call, You know, if you want me to call you Shaniqua, then that's your name, okay? Right? This is not Shaniqua. She does. What would you like me to call you?
Laura.
Laura, okay, Laura, thank you. All right, all right. So gender identity is that sense of being. And when Bruce Jenner came out, I'm like, he said, I've always felt like a woman. And I asked myself, what does that feel like? Like, what does feeling like a woman feel like? So then I asked some guys, what does feeling like a guy feel like? Yes.
Pretty good if you're asking me.
Yes.
It feels, I don't know. The word I'm looking for is, I guess, green, strong.
Strong. Okay, next. What does feeling like a woman feel like?
Caring.
Caring. What does feeling like a woman feel like?
Sensitive.
Sensitive, empathetic. Give me another guy back here.
Probably not the best example.
If you don't know, say I don't know.
I don't know. I like on the spectrum of masculinity.
Yeah. So I mean, and this is the truth of it is, Donna, what does feeling like a woman feel like for you? You're in leadership.
I just feel like me. I don't really, never tried to define it before.
Yeah. And so it's an interesting thing. This gender identity is a sense of being, and then it goes on to say male, female, genderqueer, whatever. It's just a sense of being who you are, okay? For some people, this includes physical anatomy. For transgender people, it may differ from physical anatomy that they were born with and expected social roles. So now this is all kind of making sense. I see some head nods because gender is what? Behavior. Okay. All right, let's go next. All righty. Gender expression. So we had the gingerbread man, and we know that gender expression is what people have on. We've got some bow ties in the room, which she reluctantly put on, but look at her. She's wearing it with quite the amount of swag now. Okay, comfortable. Yeah. Comfortable in this gender expression. You're kind of getting towards gender neutral.
Who, me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I left the room.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, okay. And how about over here, Ashley? You've got a gender.
I feel fabulous.
Okay, all righty. So the expression is about a lot of different things. It can be the style of our hair, the clothing we select, the way we stand. And I've got a really good video later. Okay, it can be our appearance, our speech, our behavior, our movement, all kinds of things. All right, let's go next. I'm going to go through it a little bit faster. Gender fluidity. We've talked enough about that. And then here's the video. I want to play the video after, okay, if possible, because I'm going to go to some sexuality stuff. These are gender pronouns. So in the gender pronouns, we have, where is she? And here we have she, her, hers, herself. He, him, his, himself. Z, zim, zir, zirs, zirself. That's one of the more frequent ones that I've seen is zir. Some people try to do they, but it's a plural and they're trying to make a plural a singular. It just doesn't even work. The other one is em. This is how I found out my gay friend was gay, actually. We went to medical school together, and I knew he was gay. He just hadn't come out yet. So I said, I'm on the phone with him. I said, hey, I said, who are you dating now? How are they doing? What's up with them? What's up with them? He heard what's up with him. Where is him? He heard what's up with him, not So then he came out on the phone. And I never knew why he came out, but then we talked about it and stuff. And he said, well, you said what's up with him, so I figured you already knew. I said, I said, you heard him. So he's a psychiatrist, so he appreciated that. All righty. But this is in your resources, those gender pronouns. Transgender, all people who do not identify with their assigned gender at birth or the binary gender system. So this includes transsexuals, cross-dressers, genderqueer, drag kings, RuPaul, two-spirited people. Some transgender people feel they exist not within one or of the two-stranded gender categories, but somewhere in between, okay? And then there's that queer word, which we talked about. So, and then questioning. A lot of the teenagers, I think, are really in this. So if we give them permission to not have to make a decision, that's my own opinion, I think they'll feel like they're let off the hook. And then, oh, you skipped one. Yep. So the big thing is, if these are people, if the people who are on the gender sphere or spectrum had a other disease, let's say a physical handicap, what would we do? We would remove barriers. Somebody come in a wheelchair. Why are you in a wheelchair? Can you walk? Can you shower? Can you stand? Oh, okay, you need a handicap room. Okay, so we'd remove barriers, make it more able for them to navigate their own being independent. And we'd also educate ourselves about what are the needs. And we'd educate others as we know. And so that's really what is an easy approach. Because otherwise we start to get into some judge stuff, and that's difficult. It's hard to have empathy when you're being judgmental. We talked a little bit about how it's gone from homosexuality in DSM-2 to gender identity dysphoria in DSM-4, identity disorder in DSM-4, and gender dysphoria in DSM-5. Now we're on sex. All righty. So sex, again, refers to those reproductive organs, the act of recreating for intercourse, for reproductive purposes, or for pleasure. Because all sex is not just for reproductive purposes. Even the people who say it is are not being honest. That's what I heard from a few people. They were not being honest about it. This was a medical school joke that we had. What's the difference between a boy and a girl? And there is a vas deferens. So that's a little scrotum squiggly part in there. Okay, the vas deferens between a boy and a girl. And so then the nature of it is the XY and XX chromosomes. But then there's also some things that can happen biologically. This is one of the things we had to rule out with our patient L. Did he have a congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which made him have, boy parts? And similarly, you could have a girl who has, so he would have been biologically female, but looked more male. His penis would have enlarged, and he would have looked more male. Or an androgen, which is the male hormone, insensitivity, which would be a biological XY, who would look more female, because that we know of, and this may be changing with the science, all babies start out with, the same, and then you can tell later. I think as we get better technology, we may find that to be different, but certainly there's a point where there's sex, the body parts change, and so for some, it doesn't always kick in, like intersex people. So there's both nature and nurture. Sex is assigned. You're assigned male or female at birth. Self-explanatory. Intersex. I like to think of this as the deluxe kit, that people come out with both reproductive organs or a mix, such as beard, breast, and penis. Intersex is the appropriate word. Now, sexuality. We have not talked about sexuality. A few terms: asexual. There's some people who are not just celibate. They're really not sexually attracted to people. They just really kind of want companionship. And for them, that's good. They get their, I think of this, when I think about asexual, I think about like when you were under 10 years old. You didn't really think about sex with your friends, right? It wasn't about sex, that's not how you chose your friends. You chose them by who you liked. So it's kind of how asexual people are. Bisexual are attracted to their own gender and the other gender. Pansexual has to do with any of those attractions: sexual, romantic, physical, spiritual, and it could be of any particular person. Again, as we think about this, sphere of of behaviors. This is kind of where sexuality is a behavior, right? Who you're attracted to. And then, of course, homosexual and heterosexual, homosexual, same-sex relationship. Alrighty, so kind of at the end, there's a little bit more. So we were in a talk the other day, and this was a talk from Empire, which is the insurance company, and this was their quote. Next slide. The more we talk about it, the better it will get as we transition forward. So, you know, my brain is all about this gender talk at this point, and I'm like, this really came regarding electronic medical records? This is totally about, you know, diversity.